Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where we talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Prodigal Son. A great episode. A lot of interesting things went down, so let's break it down. Obviously, Malcolm is still kind of spiraling because obviously his realization at the end of last episode of like, wait, his mom knew more than what she claimed she did. So all those times she was like, there was no woman in his suitcase. I don't know what you're talking about. But now with that memory of like, wait, she knew more than she let it on. So it's like, now it begs the question, has his mom been lying to him this entire time? Has she actually known about these murders ahead of time? Did she know what her husband, their father, was doing the entire time? And that's sending him spiraling because it's like he's always thought he knew what his father was. But now that breaks into question, did he not know his mom the entire time too? Finding out that one of your parents is a serial killer and all that, that's bad enough. But finding out one of your other parents might be complicit in it because obviously she didn't want to give up everything that they had built together and have it all basically come crashing down. That's where his mindset was. And that kind of coincides with the case that they're working on too, because it involves this woman named Tatiana who was murdered. And obviously it was kind of this staged scene. So it deals with a stalker. The dude who runs thing, his name's Axel. He was kind of her boyfriend, but also like, he came up with the art pieces that, she modeled for and stuff like that. So it turns into a thing of like, Axel seems like he might be kind of a suspect, but at the same time, it definitely seems like he knows something that he's not letting anyone else know. So now it turns into a thing of like, obviously he's got Malcolm's attention because it's like, wait, you know something and there's something there. But obviously because he's still dealing with everything with his mom, he's so intent on be like, no, I need to know the truth. He's so adamant about getting the truth that he's kind of going full steam ahead at this dude instead of, taking a step back. It's actually interesting because this case kind of ties a little bit into JT. Actually, we learned a little bit about this whole situation because it's not just like, oh, he was a fan of her work. He actually kind of knew her a little bit. He actually met her once because she was at like a USO show, and they actually met, and it's like he's like her smile and everything got him through like obviously his time in the military and stuff like that, like whatever he was kind of going through then, so that's why for him it's like this murder hits a little close to home because it's not only did she grow up in the same area and stuff like that, but that moment it's like hey, like that probably in a turmoil fueled time, like that smile kind of be like, yeah, they're still good. They're still light. It's like, it kept me going, kept me up when I might have been feeling down, So her murder probably just kind of muddies that a little bit in the sense of just like, kind of like something that kind of brought a little brightness to his world. It's that light's kind of been diminished from this world to a certain extent. I've been making that metaphor a lot of just light and darkness and diminishing lights and stuff like that. Light dimming. I do that a lot. I mean, it's the age-old light versus darkness thing anyway. So, but regardless, going on a bit of a tangent. I just like that it was kind of a moment between him and Malcolm. And Malcolm was like, no, we'll catch the guy. And he's like, can you take your shaky bandaged hand off me? He's like, you're right. So that was kind of neat. I also thought it was kind of interesting. Roger, I don't know that actor's name, but he pops up in stuff from time to time. It's actually interesting, Fox related wise. He starred in a very short-lived TV Minority Report TV show. If you're familiar, it was like it had Megan Good in it. It was basically a sequel to the movie Minority Report. So I thought, which I'm kind of bummed that it didn't get more than one season, but that's a whole tangent in itself. But regardless, that's one thing I kind of know him from, but I feel like there was something more recently I've seen him in and I just can't quite place it. But regardless, it was, that's the Fox connection there. But I thought it was so, interesting, like, Roger is this stalker, but he's not the stalker they're looking for. I even love that him and JT kind of like work together to kind of make the dude kind of freak out a little bit because they're tossing his camera back and forth. I actually kind of halfway expected Malcolm to be like, oh no, here you go. And JT's about to grab it, but then he kind of lets go like, oops, your camera broke and all of that. But it's like, no, like they kind of play good cop, bad cop to a certain extent when it comes to him, but more so bad cop, bad cop. And they're like, oh, you want to keep your camera? You better just come down with us and answer some questions. And I love Malcolm be like, good job, partner. And he's like, yeah, how about we don't call each other that? I love that JT's so resistant to this relationship. I love that he's slowly warm. You definitely see it with Danny where it's like Malcolm is definitely warming up to Danny. But I think slowly but surely he's getting there with JT, but JT's putting the most resistance. I love him and Idrissa too. How like Idrissa, he's like, oh, doctor. And she's like, if you're lucky. And she's like, I mean, hi. It's just like, it's like I said, I love that kind of adorableness of just like her kind of, you see her kind of like brighten up and stuff. She smiles a lot when he's around. So it's super adorable. But nevertheless, like I said, I'm going into this tangent, but it's actually interesting kind of diving into this case because obviously Roger gets run over by a car, but luckily Malcolm, was talking to Gil at the time and was able to get, an ambulance there. And I love to pump Roger for information. It's like, yeah, honestly, his wounds are going to be okay, but it's like, man, you're not going to make it, dude. And he's like, what? He's like, no, I can't die. I have a cat, which is adorable, yet kind of sad to be like, that's all I have to live for. It's like, but my cat, what's my cat going to do without me? Like I said, it's a little funny in a very morbid way, but nevertheless, I love the whole thing of like, all right, I'll spill the beans, because it turns out Axel and Tatiana had broken up because she was actually going to go to work for a different company, for modeling and stuff like that. Obviously, it was a blowout. Axel actually hit her, but Roger could never confess this because it would be admitting to a crime that he had committed. So that's why he didn't want to say anything, because it's information he stumbled across because he was stalking her, which went against the restraining order she already had against him. That's actually a complicated thing, because I've seen that kind of pop up a little bit in crime dramas, and I think it's such an interesting thing when there's actually literally an entire movie based on that. Wasn't it called, what was it? Good Samaritan or something like that. It had, what's the actor's name? Robert Sheenan. Nathan from Misfits. He played Four, a.k.a. Klaus. Should have done that differently. Klaus, a.k.a. Four on the Umbrella Chronicles. It kind of did that same thing of like, you stumble across someone else committing a crime at the point of you committing a crime. That's how you found out about it. So that's an interesting complication. But regardless, I love that it's like, you get better, Roger. And Malcolm's walking away. He's like, hey, will you please take care of my cat? And he's like, Malcolm's like, yeah, sure thing, buddy. And I'm like, I'm wondering, would he have actually done it or not? It's kind of my big question. I doubt it, but still, I just think that's kind of like a funny note to be at. Which is funny that the whole conversation about a cat comes up, because it kind of circles back when they kind of eventually figure out the case, because it's like, oh, it wasn't a stalker of Tatiana's, it was a stalker of Axel is what this is all about. The murder of, killing Tatiana was about dealing, like, it was supposed to be like a message to Axel, because Gil had talked about a time like him and his wife ended up getting a cat will constantly drop off a dead mouse as kind of a bit of a present, and it's kind of like obviously an apt comparison. Even Malcolm being like, that's actually a really good metaphor, and then JT's like, yeah, and that's one creepy ass cat essentially. But that's what this is all about. So now it's about like trying to get to Axel to kind of reveal this particular stalker who's obsessed with him. And, Malcolm actually goes to the party and he ends up talking to Axel about it, but Axel isn't willing to give the person up because like the person is obviously someone that's a part of his entourage, and obviously they're like family to him, but at the same time it's like, this is someone that you claim to love and care about, but you're willing to let their killer go because they are family, which even, Malcolm, because of his particular situation, is like, it's okay to be afraid of family. But the fact of the matter is, it turns out it was Joey, his manager, which I guess in the grand scheme of things, it actually kind of makes sense. Because he's always, I guess in his eyes, it's like, oh, I'm always going to be looking out for your best interests. These people who are going to betray you, I'm going to always look out for you. I'm going to do what's best for you. So that's the particular regard in that situation. And it's actually sad because Axel had the opportunity to walk away. I mean, he walked away when he could have stayed, because even, Malcolm was like, hey, if you walk away, it's going to make you just as complicit as if you took place in whatever happens to me. But Axel does, because it's like, oh, I'm going to leave it to him. It's like, because he knew the moment he heard how she died, like the exhibit that was kind of made of her, that it's like, oh no, I know for sure that she's the, that he knew that exactly at that moment it was Joey that did it. But obviously he didn't want to turn on family, was kind of the whole thing, which is so interesting because at this moment, like, you can make the argument that Malcolm, all he's doing is turning against family, but still, regardless. So it's just like, it's just an interesting parallel that, ends up getting made in that regard. I mean, obviously, like I said, that's kind of the point of like tying these cases into what Malcolm's kind of dealing with at the time, but regardless. But regardless, I like that Malcolm did kind of keep his cool when, and it's like, yeah, I told them I could do it in 5 minutes, but it turns out he did it in 6. But luckily, the cops are there. Like, it seemed, because they made it seem like Malcolm had did it on his own, but it's like, no, Gil and everyone else had backed him up. So I do love that she's, because even Danny's like, wow, you were actually pretty calm under these circumstances. Were you scared at all? He's like, nah. And she's about to take the mic off him. He's like, your hands are cold. Why are they so cold? And she's like, sure thing, tough guy. I love that. But nevertheless, obviously, it's kind of interesting because obviously it's not just Joey that's going down, so it's Axel too. They're talking about him being complicit. I was wondering, were they talking about specifically about what happened? Well, because obviously they talked about the fact is that he was covering up the investigation, so I guess they're referencing the fact is that he was the one that ran down Roger and not Joey. I think it's kind of what they're potentially getting at. At least that's what I took from it. Plus the whole him basically being complicit in what Joey was about to do to, killing Malcolm. So there's that. But I think it was more so they were saying like he was covering up. So it's like, yeah. So there's that side of the investigation. And then we kind of circle into everything that Malcolm's going through. Obviously, he has to blow up with his mom. It's a big thing of like, okay, well, you're a part of these murders and stuff like that, which his mom super didn't appreciate. But then he's referencing a dress and stuff like that. And she's like, what are you talking about? So it's a thing of like, okay, so is she just that good of a liar, or does she actually not know what he's talking about? And it's this complicated thing for her of just kind of like, I've always kind of looked after you and this family. And it's almost like the fact is, it's like I had to deal with this from everyone else kind of looking at me like, oh, did you know, what did you know and when did you know it? That whole thing. But she's like, I never expected to hear that from my son, and just his constant kind of like talking to her like that. She slaps him. And so it's just puts a big wrench in the relationship. And then later on, she finds the red dress, but then she's remembering the moment he's talking about. So part of me is like, okay, immediately my brain is like, okay, so is that out of context? Because she even brings it up to Martin being like, the fact of the matter is you need to stop this. You're going to ruin everything that we built. He's like, if you think I could stop, then I would stop. So it begs the question like, okay, so did she really know? Or was this something that was kind of miscommunicated in the sense that it ended up being something else, but it's meant to seem like it's all about, the murders and stuff like that. So obviously she's drinking more to kind of deal with it, which that and the Ainsley side of things I'll get to later on. But it is actually kind of interesting, because Malcolm went to Gil at first about like, oh, let me see my mom's interview tapes when, my dad got arrested. But obviously Gil didn't want him to have that, because it's like, you're literally going to, well, for one, it's like no one's really going to sign off for you getting those, anything related to the surgeon case. But also at the same time, it's also the thing of like, I don't want you going down this path. You're already spiraling. I've seen it. Your mom's seeing it. Everyone's seen it. Even you're recognizing the fact is that you are spiraling, and that he needs to kind of deal with this. Because even like the therapist he was going to at the beginning of the episode was kind of telling him like, we need to kind of work on this. But he's kind of, getting a little manic about everything. But regardless, so there's that. But eventually at the end of the episode, Gil gives him the tapes to let him know like, what's up? And he ends up watching it, and at first listening to everything he thinks like, because his mom's like, I knew, and he's like, oh, she knew. But Jessica then goes, what she really meant is the fact is she thought this was all about an affair. So it adds a different context to everything. Because the thing you also have to think about is he did chloroform himself. And also he's probably taking his bias into like those memories of like, maybe like, I think you could easily warp those conversations to fit like the narrative that was being created that she knew about the murders. But in this particular case, she was under the impression that, because it could be seen as this thing of like, when Malcolm brought up the woman, it could have been a thing of like, oh, don't bring up the, that's what was already in her mind, that like, oh, him sneaking away, him smelling the way he did. It's like, oh, it was him with another woman. It's like, oh, Malcolm saw him with a woman. It's like, don't let your father know. You don't know what he's capable of. He'll end up destroying his entire family. It's kind of potentially what they were. But obviously his mom didn't understand the context of what he was kind of talking about, is kind of what I think it was kind of getting at. So it was kind of a bit of a misunderstanding, because the reason why his mom, because she even talks about it later on, the reason why she didn't remember it is because she was drinking a lot at the time. That was her way of dealing with, because she thought he was having an affair. And it makes sense of like, oh, you'll basically destroy everything that we built, more so like the family, everything we have, like obviously probably like their reputation as well, because that's all people like, oh, whisper, oh, an affair, blah, 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 blah. Obviously it turns into being something much worse than an affair. But it also adds this complication, because for her, she's felt guilt about it. Whereas, this newfound guilt for Malcolm is about the fact is that like, oh, what did, like, if I had contacted police sooner, maybe people would still be alive. She kind of has that same mentality, because it's like, for her, she thought it was an affair. She kind of lumped it up with that. So it's just like she drank to kind of deal with that, of like, rather than, it was her way to kind of not deal with it, not have to really confront with it. And so it's like, if I dug a little deeper or whatever, maybe if I didn't just lump it as an affair, if I looked at it a little differently, maybe some of those people would still be alive. And that's what like, guilt she's ridden with. That's why she probably doesn't want to go down that right. And that's like, while Malcolm throwing that in her face of like, oh, how could you not know, which she's talked about as well. Like I said earlier, the sense of like everyone throwing in her face of like, even the police being like, what did you know? How could you not know this is the person you're sleeping next to? So that on top of your own guilt about like, I could have saved all these people, like that's enough to make you not really want to think about that time, especially considering the fact that you were drinking because you had your notion about what it was. But it's like, because she feels responsible for all those lives, but Gil reminds her, it's like, you're responsible for 2 lives and they're at home waiting for you. And so all that she was lost and sacrificed, now Malcolm has a greater appreciation of understanding his mom, of like all that she had to go through, the scrutiny she had to go through, of all personal scrutiny as well from her own self, of being like, I should have known, I should have done this, I should have done that, I should have seen the signs, So I think that in itself, that whole situation has gained him a better, appreciation and relationship with his mom. And even, Jessica had apologized, for acting the way she did as well. So it's like, it's nice that this ended up bringing them together. What it also seems like has created a byproduct of Ainsley, because Ainsley already from the very beginning has made it clear that she's actually kind of interested in learning about her dad, because it's something that is kind of a well-kept secret of like, obviously Malcolm was older at the time, so he got to spend time with her dad. Ainsley never got that time. By the time she was growing up, at least old enough to really understand what was going on, like he was already in jail and everything. And obviously it's something her mom doesn't want to talk about either. Because for her, Martin's a bit of an enigma, that a part of herself that she's never had an opportunity to know in all these years, because it almost seems like she does a lot to, almost be like, oh, because obviously she's saying it'd be good for my career to like interview him and stuff like that, which both Jessica and Malcolm are like, that's actually a bad idea. The fact of the matter is, you see how screwed up we are thanks to your dad. It's like, you kind of somewhat managed to kind of avoid all that, which I guess Ainsley would make the argument she's kind of screwed up in her own way. But it's like, oh, all dad ever cares about is, Malcolm. But it's like, oh no, he watches all your reports and stuff like that all the time. And it's like, wait, really? It's like, yeah, he's actually kind of your number one fan. Which is interesting, because obviously she brings this up to Malcolm much later on about the whole fact is that like, wait, oh, so dad only watches me so he can check up on you and stuff like that. It was like, well, no, obviously dad's a bit of a perfectionist, the surgeon is. So it's kind of like, he's only watching you because he actually thinks you're really good. And it's like, wait, really? So it's like, there's that part of her that's like seeking her dad's approval in some weird way. It's like, most people will probably be scared away by the fact is knowing that your dad's a serial killer. But I think also the fact is that her mom's going to visit him, her brother's going to visit him. It's like, she's the only one that literally has had zero connection to him in all of her life. Probably aside from memories that she's too young to remember, that the fact of the matter, it adds this complication of like, well, what am I supposed to do? Like, like I said, there's a part of herself that she feels is missing. So we see at the end of the episode, she actually comes to visit him. And I think he's actually surprised, like, oh, I never expected you to actually show up, but here's my baby girl. It's like, oh, no, don't call me Dr. Whitley. Call me dad, So she's making it seem like she's there in a professional sense, but you're there on a personal level as well. So that's definitely going to be interesting. I'm curious, is she actually going to tell Malcolm or her mom what this, about this, whatever they end up talking about, which, what will it be? Will it end up be some where he actually ends up accidentally talking about Malcolm too much and that just pisses her off more? Because for her, it's like, even when it comes to our dad, she always, like I said, it's almost like a competition because, well, for her, when it comes to her own mom, she feels like, oh, mom's only she only cares about Malcolm, which you can make the argument. The reason why she gives Malcolm so much attention is because he's kind of super screwed up. And you came out perfectly normal, but it's almost like even her accomplishments aren't enough. It's like, wait, you don't watch my show, Mom? She's like, oh, why would I? I made reference to that before of like, even Ainsley being like, holy crap, you don't watch my stuff, Mom. So she feels like she kind of has to overachieve to get some attention. So it's like, if she can't get it from her mom, maybe she'll get it from her dad, which that's a whole twisted, complicated thing. Because even the fact is that Jessica and Malcolm made a point to be like, hey, we're not going to let him put a wrench in our relationship. We're not going to let him get between us again. But obviously that might become like a complicated triangle situation because that adds in Ainsley. Maybe he'll end up putting a wrench in their relationship with them. I don't know. I'm really, really curious to find out the aftermath of that, like in the next episode, like whether or not we'll actually be able to see that conversation. Is it something Ainsley's going to keep to herself? Is she actually going to visit him multiple times and, keep it from them? Because it's like, oh, they kept it from her. So maybe she'll do the same because she knows they'll kind of get in the way if she says anything. So is she going to go the one time and they'll find out? Will she go out multiple times? I don't know. I'm curious to see ultimately, where that ends up going in the grand scheme of things. So. But, I'm very excited to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good